We continue now at the top of Daf Vav Amud Beis in Mesechet Kesubos. This is Kesubos Daf 6b. The Gemara is in the middle of asking a question from a Mishnah Nida regarding whether or not it is permissible to have the first act of relations on Shabbos. And so the Mishnah Nida said if you have a situation of a girl who has reached the time when she would see her period, so then Beis Hillel say the first 4 nights that they have relations through Motzai Shabbos, so those first 4 nights you can assume that it's not Dam Nida. And the Gemara now says, my lav, is it not saying as follows? The Elo Baal, that if he did not have any relations and now Shabbos comes, Friday night comes, Motzi Baal, that person is allowed to have the relations on that night. Isn't that implied in this statement of Beis Hillel in this Mishnah? Rashi over here says, my lav, hanachar Baal leilos ad Motzai Shabbos. When Beis Hillel say you have 4 nights through Motzai Shabbos, the Katani lachi tanilu, that's the purpose of saying it. The Elo Baal, Be'ila Gemura. Now Rashi explains over here, the case is the person did have relations, let's say on the first night, but it wasn't a Be'ila Gemura. It wasn't a full penetration in such a case, so therefore Motzi Lemel, he could continue to do that. V'chol dam shu motzi tamid barosav have a dam besulim, and any blood that comes out, Beis Hillel is saying, is considered dam besulim. V'sham minon nami, so therefore implied in this whole discussion in the Mishnah is the mutter livel bechabura b'Shabbos, that it's permissible to have relations and create a wound on Shabbos. That seems to be what the Mishnah is saying. Again, that's what the Gemara over here means. The ilo baal, motzi baal, means to say he didn't have a full bia, he's allowed to afilu b'Shabbos, even on Shabbos, seems to be a proof from this Mishnah. So Amar Rava says, lo, no, that's not what it means. Levar mi Shabbos. It means to say, with the exception of Shabbos. It doesn't mean to say that he's allowed to have the act of relations on Shabbos. It means through Motzai Shabbos, through that time period, so that's going to be considered not Dam Nida. The Gemara says, Amar le Abayis. Abayis is back to him to Rava. What are you talking about? V'ha'ad Motzai Shabbos arba leilos katani. It says explicitly, it's considered to be Dam Besulim until Motzai Shabbos 4 nights. You have to count all 4 nights. That includes Friday night as well. And as Rashi over here explains, V'arba leilos ad Motzai Shabbos katani v'lo mashkachas le. You're not going to have 4 nights through Motzai Shabbos, levar mi Shabbos, if you don't count Shabbos. This is because they're getting married on Wednesday. V'yeshkan leile chamishi. So you have here Wednesday night, v'shishi Thursday night, v'Shabbos, that's Friday night, to Motzai Shabbos, and that's Saturday night. That's your 4 nights. So that's what Abai is arguing to Rava. It has to be that they're having relations on Friday night. And so the Gemara continues, Elo Amar Rava, no, rather Rava says, the case is as follows, Kisha Baal. They actually already had a full act of relations before Shabbos, and so it's in that situation that the Mishnah is saying, if they have relations on Friday night as well, and there happens to be blood, that's going to be considered Dam Besulim. But the Gemara asks on that, Ikisha Baal, if the case is that way, that they had a full act of relations before Shabbos, so my kamashmalon, so what's the chiddush? Now Rashi over here explains, Ikisha Baal, if the case is they had a full act of relations, and the only thing it's teaching us is that there are 4 nights where if we see blood, we consider it dam besulim. So Shabbos, my kamashmalon. Why does it say in this Mishnah until Motzai Shabbos? Just say 4 nights is what we consider dam besulim. Listening, nos and lo arba leilos. Just say she has 4 nights where we assume it's dam besulim. Al karchach misham bila Shabbos nakalo. It's got to be that there's some chiddush over here that you're allowed to have relations on Shabbos. That's the question of the Gemara. Ika shabal my kamashmalon. And so the Gemara answers, no, it is a chiddush because kamashmalon deshari lemival b'Shabbos. It's still teaching us a chiddush that it's permitted to have relations on Shabbos. Kiddush Shmuel, like Shmuel says. The Amar Shmuel, because Shmuel said, Pirza dechuk, even if it's a narrow opening, muterli kanes b'Shabbos. You can enter into there on Shabbos. V'afapisha meisher tzoros, even though you may remove some pebbles. As Rashi over here says, Shemesher tzoros v'hainami dilma mechavel por. So there is a little bit of a concern, even though they had a full act of relations before Shabbos. There is a bit of concern that there's going to be a small wound. And the point is, you might think it should be usher, but no, we do not asr, we do not prohibit out of this doubt that there might be a small wound that is created. And the Gemara continues with another question. Mesev Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef asks the following question: Chasan pater mikriyas shema laila harishon ad motzai Shabbos. It says that the chasan, he's pater from kriyas shema, the first night. That's the first night after the wedding when he's having relations with his wife until motzai Shabbos. Imlo asa ma'isa, if he didn't yet have the act of bia, because again he's preoccupied in his mind with the act of relations, and therefore he is pater again from kriyas shema. And so Rav Yosef says the following: My lav, is it not? The point is that every one of these nights, it's in his mind, he's preoccupied with the fact that he has to have relations, as Rashi says. My love, hide the potter lemi Kriyas Shema b'leilei Shabbos. Why is he potter on Friday night from Kriyas Shema? Mishum detard b'mitzvah, because he's preoccupied with this mitzvah. Deboy lemival, again, because he's going to do this mitzvah of having relations. V'osek b'mitzvah, potter min ha-mitzvah. And the whole point is, there's a principle. If you're in the middle of doing one mitzvah, you're potter from another mitzvah. That's the whole idea. And again, it's implied over here that even on Friday night, if it's the first time, it would be permissible. And so the Gemara says, Amar le Abaye, Abaye says back to him, to Rav Yosef, lo no, the tarid de lo bal, it could be a different kind of tarid. He's preoccupied because he hasn't done the mitzvah. Rashi says, the tarid de lo bal, mitztar, shelo bal, he's in pain because he didn't do the mitzvah yet, and so therefore that's also a reason to exempt him from Kriyas Shema. So Amar le Rava, so Rava says to him, to Abaye, umisham tir de pater, just because of a preoccupation that doesn't have to do with the mitzvah, that's enough to pater from Kriyas Shema. Rashi says, misham de tarid pater bitmiya, that's a wonder. Umisham tsar pater me'achar sheina mechashiv lasok mitzvah. He's not even thinking about doing a mitzvah, lasok b'mitzvah, and just the pain alone, that would pater him from the mitzvah of Kriyas Shema. Ela me'ata, but according to that, tavas v'naso bayam, let's say a person's ship, it sinks in the sea. Hachanami the pater, you're going to say the same thing, that he's pater from Kriyas Shema, he's pater from mitzvahs. V'chitema hachanami, and if you'll suggest, yeah, indeed that is the case. If you're in such a situation, you're pater from mitzvahs. V'amar Rabbi Abba bar Zavda marab, but Rabbi Abba bar Zavda said in the name of Rav, Avil, if you have somebody who's in mourning, chayiv b'chol mitzvah, samuris b'torah, he's chayiv in all mitzvahs of the Torah. We don't say the pain of the avelus of the mourning exempts him. Chutz min tefillin shenemar bohen pe'er, except for tefillin because they're referred to as pe'er. But other than that, the avil is chayiv. Rashi says shenemar bohen pe'er chachavo shalecha. That's a pasuk in Yecheskel. Ve'avil mola b'afer karno v'rosh veins a pe'er l'tefillin. It's not considered a glory for the avil to wear the tefillin. So therefore, again, the question is, you see that the avelus alone is not going to exempt you, and so therefore the same should be true in this situation. Elamar Rava, rather Rava answers as follows. Tanoi, you have to say there's actually machlokas Tanoim on this issue. Rashi says, Elamar Rava, rather Rava says, V'adai lo motzis l'trutze had chasan pater m'kriyas shema mishum de lo motzi bol. You can't say he's exempt from Kriyas Shema because he didn't do the mitzvah yet. Dimkein lo have pater, because again, he wouldn't be pater for that. The holo tar b'dvar mitzvah, that's not called tar b'dvar mitzvah. And rather, you have to say, says Rava, you have to say Tanoi, this actually is a machlokas Tanoim, this very issue. Be'ilas chabur b'Shabbos, the issue of whether you're allowed to have relations which can create a wound on Shabbos. It's a machlokas Tanoim. Uman do aser livo b'Shabbos kitanai. Amar l'shmaita. Whoever said it's aser really understands it's a machlokas Tanoim. The ika tana achrina do aser lemival do tani chada, because there is a tana that says it is aser. In other words, what you just quoted about chasan pater mikriyas shema is assuming that it is permitted to have that act of relations on Shabbos. But we're going to show you there's another tana that says no. Tanoi the tana chada, because we have one that taught im lo asa ma'isa barishon. If he didn't do it on the first night, so pater af b'sheni, he's pater on the second night. B'sheni, and if he didn't do it on the second night, pater af b'shlishi, he's pater on the third night, meaning to say that third night, Friday night, is a night when you could have relations. But there's another brisa that disagrees. Rishon v'sheni pater on the first night, on the second night there's a p'tor, but shlishi chayiv, but on the third night chayiv, as Rashi says, shlishi chayiv the Shabbosu, that's already Shabbos, v'yasser livel. It's forbidden anyway to have relations, so you're chayiv in Kriyas Shema. But the Gemara continues via Abaye. Now Abaye, how will he respond to the fact that there are different brises? So Hasam Nami b'tir de pligi, that's no problem. The machlokus over there also was whether tirda is enough. In other words, it is true. The machlokus was exactly that machlokus, whether tirda is enough to pater him, meaning to say he's not actually having relations on Friday night, but he's bothered by the fact that he's not, that he didn't do the mitzvah. Is that enough to pater him from Kriyas Shema? Rashi says via Abaye Amar Lach. Abaye will say to you, Hanach Tanoi Nami b'tir de pligi. That's exactly what they're arguing about, meaning tirda. They're not arguing whether it's permissible or not. The one that says he's pater from Kriyas Shema, it's not because he's allowed to have relations. It's just that if you're in pain because of a mitzvah, you're pater. And it's not similar to avil, because what is Abaye going to do with the fact that an avil is not pater? It's not similar. The Torah tirda the reshus. The difference is, by the fact that you didn't have relations, there you're preoccupied, it's bothering you, you didn't do the mitzvah. But by an avil, that's bothering the avil. The fact that he's in pain has nothing to do with the mitzvah. She'ain saro mitzvah. The fact that an avil is in pain is not a mitzvah. Afa b'shavei luso mitzvah. Now, conducting the oneself as an avil is a mitzvah. Uman the mechayev savar tirda lo pater. And again, the one that says chayev says tirda is not enough. And so that's how Abaye will explain the two brises. And the Gemara continues, V'hani tanoi kihani tanoi. This machlokas tanoim above is similar to the following machlokas. We see this machlokas in another set of brises, the Tanya, because we learned in a brisa. Hakones hasabesul basula. Let's say somebody marries a basula. Lo yivo betchila b'Shabbos. The Tanna Kama explicitly says cannot have relations for the first time on Shabbos. So there you see a Tana that prohibits. V'chachamim matir, and the Chachamim say it's mutter. So there you see a Tana that says it's permitted. And the Gemara says man Chachamim. So who is this Chachamim? Amar Rabba says Rabbi Shimon. Here it's Rabbi Shimon. To Amar davar shem eskavin mutter. Who says it's davar shem eskavin? You're not having kavana to make a wound, and so therefore it's mutter. And the Gemara continues, and this Rashi mentioned Rashi mentioned earlier would be said in the Gemara. Amar le Abaye, Abaye said back to him, but 1 second, how can you say Rabbi Shimon? Isn't it going to be a certain thing that you're going to create a wound? It's a psik reisha. So the fact that it's a davar shem eskavin should not be mutter, because Rabbi Shimon admits that a davar shem eskavin is problematic when it's a psik reisha. And so to that he said, Amar le said to him, no, lo kahalolu bavliim, not like those Babylonians, she'ein bekiyin b'hatoya, they do not know, when they have relations, they don't know how to angle their body in a way that it can prevent the bleeding. There are those who are able to have relations and they can angle themselves in such a way that it's not going to create bleeding, and therefore it's not a psik reisha. It's a complete davar shem eskavin because it's not certain that there's going to be a wound. But the Gemara says to that, 1 second, Imkain, if that's the case, if these people are such experts, so then Tored Lama. So then go back to the fact that it said that he's Tored, he's preoccupied with the mitzvah, and therefore he's not able to say Kriya Shema. Why is he preoccupied? He's such an expert at this activity, it shouldn't preoccupy him at all. And so to that, the Gemara says, you're right, l'she'eino baki. So that's talking about someone who's not an expert. In other words, not everyone's pater from Kriya Shema. Somebody who's a baki would not be necessarily pater, but an eino baki, so the person who's not an expert would be pater from Kriya Shema. And so the Gemara says, Yomru baki mutter, she'eino baki asur. Let them say that somebody who is an expert is mutter, and somebody who's not an expert, it's not mutter. In other words, we should say, if you're going to have relations for the first time on Shabbos, that should only be allowed for an expert. Rashi over here says, first again, Imkain de bekim, if they're such experts, Tored lama mao tirdoli pater min Kriya Shema. Why is he pater? So he said, baki mutter lival b'Shabbos. Why don't they say that an expert is allowed to have relations for the first time on Shabbos? The lo psik reisha, because it's not a psik reisha, but the lo psik reisha v'lo yamasu. So why don't we make a distinction and say that? And to that the Gemara says, no, rov b'kiyan hein. The truth is the majority really are experts, and Rashi says, rov b'kiyan hein hilkach stam alab psik reisha v'lo yamas. So therefore stam, you can assume it's not a psik reisha v'lo yamas, and that's why it is going to be permitted again on Shabbos for the first time. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Rava bar Rav Chanan li Abaye. So Rava bar Rav Chanan said to Abaye, Ela me'ata, but 1 second, according to that, Shoshvinin lama and mapo lama. What is it that we need? There are people who used to accompany outside of the room and inspect the room to make sure that the people wouldn't bring in false evidence that she wasn't a basula, and you also had a mappa, you had a cloth that was used as evidence. What's the purpose of that? Rashi explains the question, Shoshvinin lama, me'achar sheyesh bekiyin livo below dam. If it's really true that people are such experts, they can have relations without causing blood. So Hadatanya Lakamon, there's a brisa that says later on, they used to have two people, one for his side, so to speak, and one for her side, so to speak. And they would be like the investigators to make sure that nobody was cheating over here. To make sure no one's cheating betainas basulim and claiming that she was or wasn't a basula. Now, if everyone's able, if people are experts to make sure that there's no blood, Shashvin and Moelin. What's going to help for the Shashvin, and how are they going to help? And Mapalama Lavaras Abasulim. What's the map? What's the cloth going to help to determine anything? There's no way to determine anything because it's possible they have relations and there's no blood, and it doesn't prove anything in terms of whether she is or is not a Basula. And so the Gemara answers, Amar Le, he said back to him, Hasam Shemayira V'Yovad. Over there is a purpose because maybe she will see blood and it will be lost. Rashi over here says, Amar Le Shemayira V'Yovad Shema Lo Yata. Maybe he won't angle himself. V'Yotzi Dam V'Yavdenu. And then what's going to happen is the blood's going to come out and there's evidence that she's a basula and they'll destroy it. V'yomer lo matzasi dam, and he's going to claim, again falsely, that there was no blood. The ilu b'hataya, now Rashi points out, if he did it b'hataya, if he did it by an angle and there was no blood, in bo liton tomar lo adayin basulani, she would have no problem then. Because if he's going to try to lie, she can simply say she's still a basula, and she is still a basula. She'd have evidence that she's still a basula, but the concern is the opposite. The concern is she won't be a basula anymore, there will have been blood, and he'll try to destroy that evidence, and that's why we need Shushvinin and Mappa in order to prevent that from happening. And the Gemara continues with another question. Meisiv Rabbi Ami. Rabbi Ami asks the following question. The Mishnah says, Hamapis Morsa b'Shabbos. Let's say somebody drains some pus from some kind of a pimple on Shabbos. Im la'asos la pechayiv. If the purpose is to make an opening, so that's chayiv. V'im lahotzi mimen alecha. But if it's just to get the pus out, so then we're going to say it's potter. Rashi over here says hamafis morsa bosech pesha korn klug im la'asos la pesha meskavin liaposa v'lios la pesach zel liyom machri. He wants to open it up, make it nicer, have an opening for the next day. Chayiv. That's a problem on Shabbos. Shumasak and Pesach is creating a Pesach, an opening. V'chayiv mishum bona. That's all in the category of bona, of building. The eshkuchan binyan b'balei chayim. We do find that even by living creatures you can have building. The chsiv vayiven asatzela. We see that language used over there in Parshas Bereshis, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Zayin Amud Aleph.